Can you hear me online? Nice to see you, Charisse. I'm glad you finally got your video fixed. Good to see you all online. Good to see you all here in person. Just waiting. Someone want to record this? Is the recording going? Okay. Just waiting for Roshi. What happened to Sam?
Yeah, I was just gonna say, is Sam here?
Huh?
I'm not sure, I can look.
Yeah, you want to go
Yeah.
get him? Huh?
Is this recording or is it? Wait, it is.
Diane, can you move the mouse just so I can just wait with it? Yeah, it's recording. Oh, it's stopped recording.
Oh, there you go.
Hmm?
She said just check with Sam.
That's all right. We're still setting up here in the Buddha Hall for those of you online, so bear with us. So good morning, everyone. This is the second day of our 7-day retreat. The second day, some of you are doing 3 days, some of you are doing 7. So I'd like to give a talk today on living a life of openness. You know, our mission is to empower you to live a Zen-inspired life of openness, empathy, and clarity. And so I'd like to talk about openness, that aspect of openness, and why that's part of our mission and why it's important. It's amazing being in this retreat. I came down last night for evening sitting, and I walked in the door, and I was a little taken aback because the Buddha Hall was crowded. You know, not used to the Buddha Hall being crowded. So it's nice that we're all here, that we can do this practice this way. We probably wouldn't do this by ourselves. I mean, you could. I've done retreats by myself, but they're hard. They're not easy to do. And so we're actually helping to support each other by doing this together.
Your chair is on great, I just
I have been corrected. That's all right. How's that? Okay. So doing a retreat's important. This is not something that most people do, but you are all doing it. And I'm really grateful to see you all practicing so sincerely, earnestly, showing up. And This is what Zen looks like. I mean, this is what Zen training looks like. This is it. This is what we do. We sit still. We learn how to be bored and take our place in the world. Without being able to be bored, we can't really be here fully. We don't allow enough space for our lived experience to be full and complete. And after all, Zen is important because it's about being intimate with our our experience as it is, the one that you're living right now. And you might think, oh yeah, of course, that's so obvious. No, it's not obvious. Often we are not intimate with our experience as it is because our attention is fragmented, it's scattered, we're multitasking, we're stressed out, we're doing all kinds of things, we're disembodied. And so when you come into doing meditation in the way that we do it, you're training the quality of your attention to show up and be present moment by moment. And when you do this, what you discover is that you actually have a very rich tapestry of contextual relationships going on in your life, moment by moment. Relational contexts. And each one of us has that rich tapestry, and we bring that into this room, sitting together with those of you online, how much richer that tapestry gets. Now, we're not talking, we're doing this practice in silence, and yet the number of contexts here are really uncountable. Some are verbal, but most of them aren't because we're in silence, except for some of us. So that you would think, oh, we're in silence, so there's nothing happening. No, there's a lot happening here. There's a lot going on. You bring into the Zendo your family, your work, your professional anxieties about the world, the environment. Is the food going to be good? There's all kinds of contexts that make up your lived experience in this moment right now. So if this is how many of you is this your first retreat? Yeah, okay. Brave to do your first retreat. It's always, you don't know what you're walking into. Now, Bernie called this a plunge. And he thought plunges were really good. Like doing a bearing witness retreat in Auschwitz the first time. That's a plunge. Because you're putting yourself in a situation where you don't know what to expect. And a lot of strange things going on around you. New people, chanting sutras that you don't understand. And so, that can be kind of scary, and it also can be enlivening because it's an adventure. And I think since the pandemic, we have become a little less adventuresome. We've become risk adverse. Do you remember what it was like during the pandemic when you'd be walking down the street and you see someone coming on the same side and you'd cross over to the other side of the street? We got trained by the pandemic to be risk adverse, and I think doesn't always serve us. So one of the things that has bothered me this year, because it was a political year, and I don't want to go into, what do I want to call bipolar politics? What's it called? Politics. I don't want to go into either side or any of that. But what has bothered me much of this year is how hard it is to have conversations with people, to have a good conversation where we explore something and we learn something together. And so I think because of the culture we live in and, all kinds of historical, social, political factors, we are increasingly finding we have the most sophisticated technology on the planet. These things have stuff that makes satellites go to the moon in them. I mean, we got the most complicated, sophisticated technology, and yet we're almost destroying ourselves. We're almost destroying the planet. And we can't seem to have conversations. We can't communicate. Life is complex. Our lives are complex. So, we studied the Yogacara this Ango, some of us, and sort of appreciate that how our minds work, and that part of our mind is unconscious, it's not known to us, and has a huge impact on how we behave, on our habits, the choices we think we're making when we may just be responding habitually to something. So our life is an ecology. This is an ecology. A community is an ecology of many, many networks and contexts, that seen and unseen, verbalized and not verbalized. And when we take something, why Zen is important, why this is important, is because this is what living a life of openness is about: appreciating the rich fabric of your lived experience and all the ecology that makes that up. So we get into trouble when we try to pull something out of that. And we do this all the time. We abstract something out. We pull it out. The example is making a wish. If you've read any fairy tales or mythology, often when people make wishes, it doesn't go well. Why is that? Why is that? You're in this moment with your thoughts and feelings, and you make a wish for something to happen a year from now or in 2025. That hasn't arrived yet. But when it does, you're far away from the lived experience you were in at the time that you made the wish. So you know what people make wishes for. If you're poor, you wish to be wealthy. But that doesn't necessarily have a good outcome, because then all of a sudden all your distant relatives and cousins are visiting you all the time, and your life gets more and more complicated. You didn't anticipate that when you won the jackpot. Or maybe you're unwell and you wish for health. But what we're doing when we make a wish is we're trying to pull something out in a kind of linear way from the ecology of our lived experience, right? We're sort of pulling it forward and projecting it into the future, which hasn't arrived yet. And so that's when we do that, we're just really not appreciating the complexity and the richness of our experience in moment by moment. And you can plan for the future, and we do. And it may or may not go well, because much of what we are doing is improvising, and we don't know what's going to happen tomorrow. None of us does, really. You don't know. You may be coming here in the morning and you get a flat tire and you can't get to meditation. Who knows what's going to happen tomorrow? We're improvising all the time, and Zen is really about learning how to improvise. That's how to be skillful. If we're just acting from a habit, from a conditioned habit, a kind of an automatic response, and we're not really meeting the moment. Schools. Leftover systems from the Industrial Revolution is pretty much what our schools are. And you think you can, measure a child's math abilities by giving them a standardized test. That's an illustration of a fundamental misunderstanding about children, math, and tests. Children learn all day. They don't need us adults around to learn. They're learning machines. They're not learning, man. They're playing in the playground, playing in the forest. You don't think they're learning math when they play come on, the math is in the world. They're seeing all kinds of patterns of change and they're learning math. They're living math. So the test does not measure the child. The test measures the structure of the system that relies on giving tests. We do this all the time. We pull something out from the living ecology of our lived experience and we abstract it. In other words, we decontextualize it. Now, if you want a really obvious example of this, just think of the political season we've just gone through and all the news you listen to on both sides of people deliberately decontextualizing something somebody said to make a point, right? To win a point, to spin the argument. And it's exhausting. It's a lie by omission. To decontextualize something is to do violence to what you took it out of, to what somebody actually said, to the nuance that they might have been trying to communicate. To decontextualize that is to abstract it out into something that it isn't that anymore. But we do this all the time. We are abstracting something out from our lived experience. Take the example of our ego or ourself. In a sense, we are abstracting out from our actual lived experience here some notion of an individual, isolated self that is here without relationship to each other, to anyone else. That's a delusion. That's a mistaken perception, because I'm giving this talk with you all in the room, and what you say or ask me is going to influence what I say. When we have a conversation, it's that we are meeting each other with what we say to each other. But we are so individualized in this culture, we don't really appreciate what it means to be with somebody, to be connected through conversation, through language, through perception, in a way that appreciates the ecology we're participating in when we have a conversation. So there's a thought experiment that's done in high schools. I don't know if you've done this, about the lifeboat. And this is often given as a kind of an ethical example of how hard it is to make ethical decisions. And the situation is that there's so many people in the lifeboat. Let's say there's 90 people in the lifeboat, and they've got 10 seats left. And there's 100 people in the water swimming. And so the problem is presented as an example of ethical, how you make ethical decisions, which is you got 10 seats in the boat, but there's 100 people in the water, so only 10 of those people can come into the boat. How are you going to make the decision about who comes into the boat? And if you ask this to kids, they will almost immediately want to change the rules because they'll say, there's something wrong with that. There's something wrong with this question. There's something wrong with the setup. No, couldn't we do it some other way? No, you have to play by the rules. This is the system you're in. Any kid that's alive and healthy is not going to play by those rules because they're terrible rules. It's absolutely a terrible setup. There are 100 people floating in the ocean. They are not metrics. They are not numbers. They are people. They've had families. They've had children. They've graduated from college. They've been in love. They've fallen out of love. They've lost dear ones. These are people, human beings. They are not numbers. And so if you frame this situation in the way that it's often framed, it does violence to our humanity. Who's going to choose who lives and dies? What are the criteria for the choice? Are you going to choose older people because they have more experience? Or are you going to choose younger people because they have more life ahead of them? Who are you going to choose? Are you going to get rid of the sick people because they're expendable? How are you going to make that choice? Is cannibalism a possibility? No, really, I'm serious. It gets dark really fast. It gets cold. This is a cold puzzle to try to answer this. It's just dark. It leads to darkness. It leads to violence. The guy that created this little question, what's his name? Garrett Hardin created this. And he was a hardcore eugenicist. He's a nationalist, a white supremacist. This is eugenics. This problem is eugenics. How to make a better race. That's been clearly discredited, right? By World War II, which wasn't that long ago. So there's another way you could frame the question. There's a whole another way you could do it if you didn't play by those rules. Let people be people. We are complex human beings. We are resourceful. We can figure out things by working together. We can figure out all kinds of things. Okay, so we got 90 people in the boat. We got 10 seats. Some people we could take turns swimming in the water. We could tie our clothing together and pull people along by the side of the boat. There's 100 different things we could figure out because we are human beings and we can create and we can imagine other possibilities. And the point here, the point about being intimate with our lived experience is that we have more possibilities. When you don't close off when you close off this moment with your opinion, your judgment, your attitude, your ideology, your point of view, you've just closed off a multitude of possibilities that were there for you that are no longer available to you because you created closure. So in a way, we're talking about not knowing, aren't we? We're talking about showing up to be open. To be open to your life, to your experience, is to appreciate the complexity of yourself as a human being and the multitude of contexts that exist in any moment in your life. And when we have a kind of perception to take that context seriously and not do too much violence to it, then you find you have many more possibilities available to you that you wouldn't have even thought of. So, the menu is not the meal. If you ate the menu, it would be pretty dry. So, this is a famous thing that, what's his name said? Korzybski. Alfred Korzybski said, the map is not the territory, right? The map is not the territory. Those are two different, the territory is your life that you're living here, right now, sitting in the chair. This is not a map, not the same thing. Your life has many possibilities and contexts in this moment. The map, not, I like Google Maps, by the way. I look at them all the time, but it's not the same. Looking at a Google map of Oak Park is not the same as walking out in Oak Park. It's just not the same. We use GPS all the time too. That's great too, but it's not, GPS is not a walk in the park. Not the same. So Gregory Bateson called this confusion of logical types. In other words, the menu is a singular kind of logical type. The meal has many contexts. You sit down for a meal with your family. There's the stories about what your kids did at school, if they'll talk to you. They might not want to talk to you. That's a whole nother context. There's worries about finances or gratitude about a friend that you just seen or someone has died in the family. Death is a huge context. It's context right here. We wouldn't be doing Zen practice if anyone here that has not lost a friend in your life so far? Not a one of you. Death is part of the context here. Has to be. So we need to expand that. Map is not the territory. Name is not the thing named. Right? The Tao that can be named is not the true Tao. Nutrients are not the meal. I just took a class at the YMCA, the 3-month class on losing weight. And it was good, but it got kind of linear after a while. And I found myself saying things like, well, yeah, counting calories is good, but having good relationships is just as good for losing weight. I think that's another kind of nutrient I appreciate in my life. And the life coach that was teaching it just looks at me like, you an idiot? No, I really mean it. So we abstract things out from the wholeness of life all the time. This is what we do. And it comes from our cultural upbringing. And once we have abstracted something out, we've decontextualized it. We've taken it out of the context of its living ecology. And we can do this with the greatest sincerity and the best intentions and still create more problems because we're not actually addressing the problem. If you're a doctor, you might be addressing the symptom, but not the cause. Sometimes that's a good thing. When I broke my arm and I went to the hospital, I wanted the doctor to address my broken arm, not whether I was depressed about something yesterday. But if I go to my general practitioner for a checkup, a physical, kind of want him to talk to me a little bit about my life. They sometimes ask you those questions in the hospital, like, have you been suicidal lately? They're trying to get at, what's your emotional life like? So that's good. Because we can be sick, and our sickness can be caused by industrial agriculture. Our sickness could be caused by insecticides that are being sprayed on the farms around Chicago, or polluted drinking water. So I just want to, when we eat oryoki, for a while I had thought we were free of oryoki because in my attempt to secularize our practice, I said, we're going to go back and eat like regular Americans. And I was very happy with that for a while. But some of you kept insisting that you said you were missing something. And okay, it's not fair that they should miss out on the fun of oryoki, which is some people, and I had stopped doing it because some people get really upset doing it. They're always last or they can't tie the knot. And it's just, I said, why create that kind of pain for people? But then we started doing oryoki, I think it was this year, wasn't it? With the spring retreat, it was the first time. And I found I really enjoyed it. I liked it. And there's something, talk about context. We chant. You notice what we chant? We chant the names of the past 7 Buddhas. That's part of the context of eating a meal. You're being one with the past 7 Buddhas. How old are they? We're not, the sense if you get when you chant before eating the meal is we're not living to eat. We're eating to live. We're eating so we can fulfill our bodhisattva vows. That's a very different sensibility. And then we bring into what's the context of the meal? How did the food get to us? Who grew the food? Where was it grown? Who was the farmer? Who was the trucker that drove it to Pete's? Who was the person at Pete's that laid it out on the counter so that we could buy it? And the person behind the counter that sold it to. All those are part of the context of the meal we're having. But we often miss all that richness. And so I really like oryoki because we have to eat together, which is very unusual, I think, now in our culture, increasingly. I don't know if you have a good, do you eat together in your family?
Yes, but very quickly.
Very quickly. Not like oryoki. They would rebel if you did. You would have a riot on your hands. And you try. I'm not suggesting you introduce oryoki to your family. That would be a disaster. You would be, yeah, you would fail as a parent. You would be kicked out of the house. So, yeah, but look at all the rich context that when we eat the meal this way, slowly, well, not so slowly, but slow enough, slower than usual, and we eat together and we wait for everyone. And that just seems very sane way to eat a meal together, and a way to do it with some appreciation of the richness of what's taking place when we eat the meal. We're not just living to eat. We're eating to live. It's a very different sensibility. So I grew up in the 70s, so I don't know what generation we have different generations here, but the emphasis back in the 70s was to be, we're going to be better I'm going to be a better person. There's a lot of all the self-help movement, we're all going to be better people. And, yeah, okay. But who can I be with you is a better question. Who can we be together? That's much more ecological, isn't it? How do we complete each other in our conversation? That's important. Our relationships, that's what's important. People think Zen is about some individual satori. Well, it is, but once you've had that, it's completely relational. Ecologies bring life into the world. The way we bring life into our lives is to open to the life we're actually living, not the one we wish for, but the one that we have, with all the joy and sorrow that goes with our lives, with the people we have lost. Trungpa calls it the setting sun vision. In much of our culture, people are scared of death, terrified of death, really. And so lifestyles are created in such a way to avoid death, any thought about death or possibility of being around death. We might watch a lot of it on TV, but we don't want to be close to death. We want things to be convenient. I want my tea to be right here when I reach for it on the table. So we are living ecologies that are moving metabolisms, and when we grab things out of that living ecology, we freeze them in time, we abstract them, and we decontextualize a huge part of our humanity. And I think we're doing it increasingly in this culture, and I think it's important for us to begin to understand the difference between the menu and the meal. Okay, I think we could have some discussion about this maybe. Have any comments or questions? Got time?
Danger of being the first one is I then have to figure out how to turn this on. Can everybody hear me?
You gotta speak up, Eric, because I'm half deaf.
Sorry.
I'm getting hearing aids this week, but I don't have them yet, so.
I just want to say that I did have oryoki trauma yesterday,
Oh, you did?
but it wasn't really oryoki trauma. I actually, even though I'm still learning, I kind of enjoy that process. But as you may have figured out yesterday, I am a slowpoke, and I am the slowest eater at any table, which is partly why I actually kind of avoid communal eating whenever I can. But, I felt okay with that, and, so I like it.
Someone has to be
It's
last.
an adventure,
Someone has to be last.
and someone has to be last.
You know, my trauma is from 19 years ago, oryoki. And I came back. But anyway,
You
yeah.
survived,
Sort of, yeah.
sort of.
Anyway, I really appreciated the take on the story of the boat. I mean, in how many situations do I find myself, or do we find ourselves, where we're told to play by the rules?
Yeah,
And the rules are very unsatisfying
yeah,
and dehumanizing.
yeah,
And thinking that I don't have to necessarily follow those rules. There's got to be some other way to use my imagination to take that situation and make it more respectful to people, more respectful to our humanity, to our integrity. So thank you for that.
yeah, it's happening all the time in our culture. Things get framed in a way that's a kind of zero-sum game. And then, and it gets framed this way in politics, if someone loses, it's the end of democracy. All the hyperbolic stuff that goes on and the panic around that. And just no capacity to see any middle ground or to listen to people we disagree with, and instead of demonizing them. That's yeah.
Yeah, I think that was interesting, thinking about how, like from the standpoint of that experiment, from a eugenics standpoint, he's trying to describe a solution to that problem that isn't centered on what most people would consider what we should be trying to solve. Like most people would say, how do we save as many people as possible with this situation, versus he's trying to say, how do we genetically create the best product of this situation, with who is left. And it kind of makes you think about a lot of other things in our society around us that are designed in a way where maybe it's solving a problem or trying to be the best possible solution to something, but the actual thing they're trying to solve is not maybe the thing we should be trying to solve. Like, I think a lot about the way we lay our cities and stuff, with the way that, for a long time, cities were planned kind of almost ad hoc by the people who lived in it. And there wasn't really this central planning. But then we designed, at the 50s going forward, designed all the cities to say, like, what's the best for the cars to move us most efficiently around. And then now we have these little catwalks we walk on. There are sidewalks that are always falling apart, and there's potholes everywhere, and there's nowhere to go outside and be outside. And it's not designed for us. It's designed for how you get a car as quickly around as possible. And I think there's layers and layers and layers of that around us, of things that we said, well, that's the best way. I mean, how else are you going to do it? And it's like, well, maybe it's the best for the cars, but maybe it's the best for the best genetics we can get, or if you want to think about it, to kill off as many sick and old people, but it's not the best way to be.
Yeah, because we have such big problems like global warming, we tend to have a crisis epistemology mindset when we approach that, because it is urgent and it is extreme, but we end up out of that crisis epistemology, we create linear solutions that don't apply to the Earth, which is a complex system. You're not going to solve the problem of global warming with linear engineered solutions. It's more complex. It's more complicated. And so we do this all the time with things. We pull something out and abstract it with the best of intentions, and are totally missing the underlying cause of, and think we're solving a problem, but we're actually not addressing the ecological dysfunction that's happening in the system. Michael, I saw you with your hands up. Yeah.
Yeah, thank you, Roshi. I'm a little bit stuck on the map and the menu. I think that I'm eating the meal, but how can I identify where I'm stuck on the menu, or how do I know what the menu is in my life and try to go beyond it?
It's a different logical type. There's nothing the matter with the menu. You need the menu to figure out what the restaurant has to serve you. So you're going to look at the menu, and then you're going to make a choice. But the meal has a different context than the menu. The menu has some context, someone wrote it, and the font that was used and the way it's designed, but its context is limited compared to the meal you're having with your wife or your son. That meal has a rich context. It's a different logical type. And I think what's important is that we begin to have some sensitivity about the difference. The menu is a kind of abstraction. It's not bad. You need the menu, but once you've ordered the food, you don't need the menu anymore. You're gonna get the food. And the meal is something different than the menu. And just noticing that the meal brings with it a richer fabric of context, of conversations, of stories than the menu does. And that the map is not the territory. We talk about mandalas. We could say everything is in the 5 Wisdom mandala, but the mandala is not the territory. The mandala is just a map of something that, it's a useful map that gives us an idea about what's possible in our lived experience of wholeness. The mandala is representing a view of life that is whole, and we could begin to appreciate that our life is whole in that way, but the mandala is not our life. Does that make sense?
Yes, and I really like the analogy, but I guess I'm wondering, when I get to the meal, I mean, it's not a logical flow from one to the other, but is it a matter of recognizing that context? Is that what you're saying? And just knowing when I'm there, I know it?
I think there's all kinds of things like this that happen in our lives. You have an emotion, But you're not the emotion. If you're mindful, if you're being conscious, you have some meta-awareness of having the emotion. So you're not fully identified with the emotion. If you're fully identified with the emotion, it's kind of one-dimensional. There's me and the emotion, and it doesn't have anything to do with anybody else. It's my drama. It doesn't evoke much inspiration, but if I have an awareness that I'm having the emotion is arising, and there's all kinds of reasons why the emotion may be arising in my life, now I have a richer way to approach that experience. I'm not just identified with the emotion as myself. I have a meta-awareness of it, and I think mindfulness does this in all kinds of ways. It helps us have just a little bit of distance from something that we might otherwise be 100% identified in a way that removes us from the larger context in which it's taking place. Yeah.
Roshi, I really appreciate the notion of how conversations have deteriorated and dwindled, and I think it's sort of the lost art of conversation. And I remember a book way back when that was called The Art of Listening. And I thought, oh my, how beautiful that is to see conversing with someone, maybe someone that's very different from us or we don't understand, as an art form, as an ability to be present and engaged, even if what they're saying may not resonate at the time. I mean, I feel like there's a lot we can know, or if we have the intention to know, or to just listen. So I really appreciate what you're saying, because I think how many times do we avoid those conversations because they might be difficult, awkward, confusing, aggressive, but I think it's so foundational in terms of how we engage relationally. So thank you, really appreciate it.
Sure. Ellen, I saw your hand up.
Okay. So you mentioned that we may make decisions about the future. We may make decisions about the future in the context of the present. And when we get there, and I'm feeling a lot of emotion around this, but when we get there, it might not be what we intended.
Yeah.
So my question is,
Give us some Kleenex.
it's okay, I got it.
You're allowed a Kleenex if you're crying. It's okay.
So my question is, how do I sit in the present?
How do you?
Sit in the present and make decisions about the future.
Well, you start by just acknowledging your sadness. It's part of the richness of you. Our culture's so messed up. We don't think it's okay to be sad. I mean, how violent is that? So you start in the present with your joy and sorrow. I don't know what your sadness is about, but I see it. So I think we can plan as best we can, but it's never really adequate for the moment, to meet the moment. Now, if you plan in a rigid way, and you've made the plan today for something next week, and you hold to that plan in a very rigid way, it's probably not going to go well. Now, you have a plan, an outline for what you're going to do next week, and maybe this part of it works and that part of it really doesn't, and you let go of the part that doesn't because you're improvising in the moment. You're always living in the moment, and next week you'll be living in a different moment. And it will be different because life is complex. Your life is complex. And to think that you can just pull something forward, abstract it, and it'll be there waiting for you next week, wrapped up in a little present, you know, perfectly. And no, life is not like that. Nothing the matter with planning, but if we're too rigid about the way we're framing things, then we're actually closing off possibilities. So I think what's important here to get is that the reason why it's important to live a life of openness is because we are creating more possibilities for ourselves, and we want to have more possibilities. There's a kind of freedom in that. We want to be able to think outside the box, or to create something, or to approach a problem in a creative way that improvises and brings in other people, and maybe completely changes the way we were thinking about it, because we were able to access other possibilities with other people's help, maybe even, not just our own, but because we were listening to other people, we were getting feedback, which, you know, we had a plan, but we changed it. And you might change it every day going forward till you get to the plan. Then you might scrap it all together because it just doesn't work out. But you won't know that till you get to the event next week. You won't know. I think we fail to appreciate how rich our lives are in the experience of our lived subjective experience right now. And I think Zen is about appreciating this. Maizumi Roshi always said, appreciate your life. We have this incredible lives, don't we? And we shouldn't take it for granted. We're not going to be here, you know? Death is real. We will not be here forever. We are all going to disappear at some point, and we're going to lose people we love. That's for sure. And I think that's what brings people to cushions, brings people to meditation, is you want to figure out what your life is. And it's just not, what you've been doing hasn't really been working. And you find that, I don't know, I can't explain this, but when you sit still and you trust the silence, you become trustworthy. I don't know how that works, but I trust you. Seeing you sit in meditation, that inspires me. I think you're trustworthy because you're not afraid of yourself. So, not afraid of your sadness. It's a great richness in life. It's where bodhicitta comes from. Right? Our sad and tender heart is our great strength. That's how we open, right? Our hearts break open. Anything else? Come on, Ken. Come on, Ken. You're going to say something.
Prepare, no.
Unnatural for you not to ask something.
No, I think what Ellen said was beautiful, and the only thing I was going to say is talking about the menu and the meal. When Julie and I went to lunch after shopping, we said, let's go to Teisho, right? H-O-N, Oak Park. Yeah. But we were completely open about what it might be, because now borrowing from Thich Nhat Hanh, the menu is clearly the image, right? The expectation is the representation. And the reason we get upset is we create a reality from the menu to what the meal will be, and then there's the gap. Whereas the meal is the thing in and of itself. Yeah. So by staying open about what the meal is going to be, oh, it's not what I thought, versus how many times I've gone to a meal with somebody like, oh my God, this isn't what I really wanted. I want what you have. No, you ordered what you know. But it's that idea of breaking that out.
Yeah. When I went to school in Hong Kong many years ago, I used to eat in Chinese restaurants with my Chinese friends, and the Hakka people have a way of fixing a pig where they eat every part of the pig. So you're eating the dish and they say it's pig, but you don't want to know. You don't want to see the menu, what's on that menu. You just like, okay, I'm going to eat it and hope for the best, you know. Don't even want to look at it, you know. Might be an eyeball, might be something else. They don't waste anything. Yeah,
Yeah, so about the menu versus the meal.
yeah,
There's a poetic phrase, I think from a koan that I haven't studied ever, about the painted rice cake.
yeah.
Is that sort of related to this conversation? Like you can't eat a painted rice cake?
Yeah, painted, Dogen talks about it, there's a koan about it. The painted rice cake is not the real thing, you know, and we can be taken with the painted rice cake, that can be what we take for reality. Our ideas about it, our dreams of having it, and we think about it, we obsess about it, and then it arrives, and we're disappointed because it's not what we thought it was, or we're happy because it's better. Yeah, it's not the same, right? Yeah, that's what we're talking about, yeah. Yeah, the representation is not the thing represented. And you can't, when we talk about enlightenment, we're just using metaphors and stories. We're using a finger to point at it, but we're not, you can't talk about the thing itself because it defies a description. Zen is like that. You can't, defining Zen is like trying to put legs on a snake. You just can't do it. Life doesn't, you do some violence to life when you try to narrow it down to a definition that you can nail it down to, oh, this is what it is. No, life is complex. It's full of paradoxes. We're both alone in our practice. We have to be alone and we're together. It's a paradox. And what a wonderful paradox to have. If we were just alone, it might be lonely. But we can be alone together in a way that's really powerful. And we're each taking care of ourselves, you know. The Sangha is this beautiful, genuine community. And the sense of the Sangha is we do take care of each other, but you also have to take care of yourself. It's your responsibility to take care of yourself. No one's going to give you a free lunch, you know. We all have to work. And then we can also help each other. So that's the sense of a Sangha. It's both communal and individual. And we need both to be complete, right? We need our individuality. Each of you is unique, utterly, totally unique, have your own cultural experiences, language, religions, families. And that's all part of the diversity that makes a community enlivening. Diversity is really important. It turns out that communities that aren't diverse, that are kind of monolithic, they're actually very much more susceptible to pandemics. They don't have diversity in their population. They found that cheetahs, cheetahs have in the wild, they have pretty big social distancing from other animals, but you put a cheetah in a zoo and they get sick and they die. Because it turns out, and at least the theory is, that cheetahs were leftovers from the dinosaur age, that they were some strain from saber-toothed tigers and they almost disappeared. And so, but they came back, and they may have come back because a couple of females survived and gave birth to all these other cheetahs, and that line of cheetahs doesn't have any diversity in its DNA. So because it doesn't have diversity, it's much more susceptible to diseases. So another point about all this is diversity is actually a good thing. Whether it be in farming instead of monocropping, we have a monocropping culture. Kind of what we're talking about is that whether the diversity be in farming or be in thinking or it be, yeah, different ideas. Diversity is a wonderful thing, and when you have diversity in the Sangha community, that's a good thing. It makes us more resilient as a community. Yeah. So maybe that's enough for today. Thank you so much. Let's keep going. This is our Rohatsu session, so just keep, please follow the schedule, keep showing up, and we will end up with a really powerful retreat. It's already powerful, and we just hold the container so it doesn't leak, okay? And thank you, everyone, for all of those of you online that are joining us. We feel your presence here and appreciate each one of you. Thank you. Yeah.
Does the practice of immediacy start today, or is
Yes, if you're in the retreat and you've been here for more than one day, then this afternoon you have the option of doing practice of immediacy, which was developed by my teacher, Nicholas McMahon Roshi. And the way that works is you can take any medium of your choice, a journal, drawing, painting, sculpting, singing, dancing, poetry, photography, found objects, any medium you want to choose, you can work with. And you use that medium as a way to mirror back your experience moment by moment. So you're not doing this to create a beautiful piece of art or to necessarily show it to anyone. You're doing it for yourself. And you're just using that medium to mirror back what your present state of mind is. So it's really actually a very powerful practice. So for instance, if I'm trying to draw, and I have a blank piece of paper and there's someone sitting over here next to me, maybe my first thought is, oh, I can't do this. I don't know what to do. And I'm feeling anxious because I'm looking at a blank piece of paper and I'm not creative enough to do anything. Anyone relate to this? So that's what you paint, that's what you draw. You draw your anxiety, you draw your inability to draw. You start drawing something. You can't fail because you're using the medium to mirror back what you're actually experiencing. And so it's a very powerful meditation practice. It's optional. You can do it for part of the afternoon. I asked that someone will be keeping the bell. Will someone be doing the bell? Not? I can do the bell. Okay. You do the bell. If you can come and go from meditation to the practice of immediacy, but do it between when the periods end. So don't just come walking into the Buddha hall in the middle of the meditation. Each meditations are 25 minutes. If you miss the first period and you want to come in, you come in the second period. Or you can stay out and do the practice of immediacy anywhere in the Zen center. You can do it in your home. Yeah, any questions about that?
And then we return.
Yeah, we have the sutra reading at 4:30, 4:25. Yeah.
back for sitting at 4? Back for sitting at 4.
Yeah. Oh, no, sitting is at 3.
If you're not doing the practice of immediacy.
Starts at 3.
Sitting starts at 3. Yeah. 3 to 4:30. 3 periods.